Hello, welcome to Wellbeing. I'm Guy Murphy. Today my guests are Dr Heidi Janssen, physiotherapist and lead researcher of the ESTEEM Stroke Recovery Program from the University of Newcastle, Jen Murrell, who is a dance instructor in the program, and Anne Angel, who is a participant in the program. Thank you for joining me on the show, everyone, and we'll start off with Anne. To provide a little bit of context before we start with the interview, the ESTEEM program is a 10-week stroke recovery program which encompasses physical, cognitive and social dimensions and activities. So, Anne, what made you decide to participate in the ESTEEM program?
I was at first at Curry Rehab Hospital, and one of the nurses actually put it on the computer and was showing us, what about it. And then when I came out, somebody rang me from ESTEEM and said, "Would I like to participate in it?" And I thought, well, I'd lost my confidence, and I wasn't very sort of like forthcoming, thinking, well, what's he going to do? But talking to the family was saying, well, if you don't like it, you don't have to go. But if you do go, we'll back you up and, help in any way that we can. So it was a family more than anything, because they know what I'm like, that I am usually confident, so they just didn't understand how they could make me feel better. But they did. They did.
Well, that's wonderful. On that note, what changes did you notice in your physical or cognitive abilities during the program?
I did gain the confidence, and it was the people that were running ESTEEM, the ladies, and the physio and Jen, and everybody's just, I can't describe how brilliant they are. And if you've got a problem about the stroke or anything like that, you can just talk to them. But the whole point is that they don't talk down to you, they talk to you and comfort you, which is it's just amazing to me. And if you sort of stand back and look at things, it's not all about the stroke, it's all about getting you better.
Absolutely. It sounds like a very nurturing environment, and that's great that you had that experience. Did anything improve that you didn't expect?
Yes, because I had to walk with a walking stick, and we had to walk around the building, and I did have my walking stick, and eventually, at the end of the course, I didn't have to walk with my walking stick, and that made all the difference. I progressed from walking with it, because obviously the stroke had affected my balance, my eyes, my hearing, and most of all the confidence, because you think, well, am I going to fall? Am I going to have another stroke? But that's what happened, and I was just amazed that in the 10 weeks, that I'd actually come through that and was able to walk without the stick.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Quite a rapid change, given that it was, only a 10-week time frame. That's quite impressive. And which activities, in terms of, exercise, social time and creative sessions, had the biggest impact on you?
All of them, because at the end of it, each one is totally different, and each one and each teacher that was there, or should I say, person that was there, they didn't judge you. If you didn't do something right, they didn't judge you. Like a lot of people tend to judge people that's had a stroke, and if they see you and they say, "Oh, you don't look as though you've had a stroke," but they don't understand what a stroke is. And the teachers, if you didn't do something right, they didn't say anything. It was just, they were just so comforting, the people. I just can't say how brilliant they've all been.
Amazing. And it sounds like that's maybe the main part of the program for you, and that's it sounds like that's that's something that you really got something out of there, being around a nurturing group. And do you think that is in equal measure as big a part of doing those sorts of activities that we mentioned before?
It was because that some of we made it sort of like fun, because a lot of people think when you've had a stroke and you'd be told, oh, you've had a stroke, as if it's devastating for the person that's had the stroke, and you're always worried about, oh, am I going to have another stroke? Because you can have one sort of quite soon afterwards. But the people there, if you can't do the exercises, don't do it. It wasn't a case of you've got to do it. And all the people that were there, we didn't it wasn't always, oh, we're talking about a stroke, we're talking about a stroke, we're talking about getting better. And at the end of the day, the people that were there with us, we became a family. And it wasn't a case of we're all sat around a table discussing a stroke, because we weren't. We were discussing how we get better.
Fantastic. That sounds really positive.
Honestly, it's unbelievable. And I mean, I just did not want to go. And my husband, Arthur, he took me to the door. And I said, I just don't want to go in, Arthur, please. And the door opened, and all the staff there, the girls and Martin, the physio, they gave me a name, and my name tag, and they all introduced themselves. And it was as if a shining light, I know it sounds daft, but a shining light that all welcomed me when I went in. And they were all smiling. And it made me feel more confident. It remained like that all the way through. They were just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that's incredible. Sounds like a very profound experience, and it just goes to show that, being open to these sorts of things can be really beneficial for people. So that's great.
It is, and they come and assess you at home at first to see how you're going on and how different things affect you. And it's not just a case of, oh, we've done that now, and they still take care of you. And they still ring me up. And if I want to go and ask them a question, I feel sure and confident that they would, tell me or direct me into the situation that I could get an answer to.
Fantastic.
And also, we had a break, and we had a drink of tea and food and everything, and they supplied it. The girls, they brought all the food in, and they didn't have to. But between doing the exercises with the physio and Jen, we could sit down and have a cup of tea and sort of just have a family matter, not strokes.
Yeah.
It's just, I just can't say enough about them, because they're just amazing. And the people that were there with us and everything, they were the same thing, the same opinion, that we did get something out of it. And I can't say it enough that please don't be afraid of it. Thinking, oh, you don't judge me. And there was no judging at all.
Yeah, well.
They just helped you. And it wasn't all this sort of like very strict and all that. We had fun. And, we made each other laugh.
Yeah.
And that's what made it as well. We were just a family.
Yeah, that's really nice. If you were to pick one moment in particular from the program that really stayed with you, what would it be?
It would be the welcome. I mean, all of it, but it would be the welcome, because it's a 10-week course, so that we saw people coming in who were like me, who thought, oh, I'm unsure about this, I don't really know what to do, and the welcome that the people there gave us was just unbelievable. Come sit down, come and have a cup of tea, and then we'll introduce you to everybody. And it just took that edge off it, and thinking, well, it's not as bad as what I thought it might be.
Absolutely. And, first impressions last, and it sounds like it was a really good one in your instance. So, Yeah,
Everybody's the same opinion. It really is. I mean, I'm not just saying it for saying's sake. They don't realise sometimes that perhaps that how good that it's made us feel.
absolutely.
It was just, it was just an experience, and I thank them.
Absolutely. Those simple things that might seem little can be quite profound and important, really.
It is, yes, because a lot of people dismiss people who've had a stroke because they expect them to be, how can I put it without, they can't communicate with you, but it isn't true that. They're people and they've just had a stroke, and it's just a case of, they're helping you there.
Fantastic. That's so nice. Well, thank you very much, Anne, for coming on the show and joining us today and sharing your experience. I really appreciate that, and it was lovely to hear from you.
Okay, and thank you very much indeed.
You're listening to Wellbeing. My guests today are Dr. Heidi Janssen, Jen Murrell, and Anne Angel. Now we'll hear from Jen Murrell, who is a dance instructor in the ESTEEM program. So, Jen, what is your role within the ESTEEM program, and what does a typical session look like for you?
So I'm a creative arts officer, is my official title in the program. There's two of us. I do dance, or we often call it movement to music, because the word dance can feel a little bit scary to some people. And we also have an artist as well. So participants will do 10 sessions with each of us. So my part of the session is 90 minutes. So it comes after morning tea. And I like to seat people in a circle because we're all even then. And it doesn't matter if we're going left or right, because I know a lot of people have trouble following left and right, even when they haven't had a stroke. So we all sit in a circle, and we do the first, probably third half of the session seated. We do some upper body, lower body. Some of it's choreographed. Some of it I try and give people time to improvise. I might give them some cues to improvise. Then we stand up. We go over to the bar so that people have got something to hold on to, and we do a couple of standing sequences. And then we come back into the circle, and I usually finish with something a bit different, something much more creative, or something that might not look like dance. It might be throwing bean bags to each other, or little hoops or something like that. And then we have a little cool down, little breathe and reset, ready to go into the rest of the day.
How do you tailor the program to suit different patients' abilities and recovery stages?
So I don't specifically tailor for people. What I do is I create a space where they can tailor it for themselves. So one of my main mantras is that it's never wrong, it's just different. It's only wrong if you hurt yourself. But if I'm reaching high above my head with one arm and a participant can't do that, that's fine. They can reach forward, they can reach sideways, they can have a rest on that arm completely. And there's no rules, there's no expectation to do, certain movements. And I very much encourage people to just move within what they're capable of, what they feel comfortable doing. Another mantra is do what you can do and don't worry about what you can't do. So if people are having trouble, then I'll give them options. And I might say, how about you just reach forward, or you can do a smaller circle. But usually I find people can figure it out for themselves, actually. And I think that's a really big part of increasing their confidence in their own ability as well.
And how do different professionals, for example, physios, OTs, speech therapists, etc., collaborate within ESTEEM?
So within the program, the artists and I, and the allied health assistants, we often help out with the physio session. Sometimes we count people's reps and stuff and have a chat to people while they're doing their physio exercises, and that sort of really helps to create the overall community as well. And then the other thing that we all do is we have a huddle before the participants arrive, and then again after they've gone home. So we have a chance to discuss, if somebody seemed a bit off today, or if somebody has called in and said they're not coming, and, so that we can sort of really figure out what's going on with everybody. We have had some talks with speech therapists and things come in and have a chat to us about, their part of stroke recovery as well. So that's been a really good insight because obviously we have people with aphasia, which is not something that we specifically target, but we need to know about it and we need to be able to help those people to communicate with us if they're having trouble finding the words. So we have speech therapists have come and sort of given us some tips on that as well.
How important is the group dynamic in patient recovery?
I'd say it's really important for building that community and the connection. And from that, they become more confident. So they can see how other people are recovering. They get to learn each other's stories. There's a lot of similarities in their stories, but also a lot of differences. And I think it's really important for people to understand all the different type of, stroke stories out there and really sort of connect on that level so they can just see what other people are dealing with and how other people have recovered. And it might give people a little bit, when they say, oh, this person couldn't even walk after their stroke, say 2 years ago or 6 months ago, and now they're coming in with a walker and they can say, oh, maybe I can improve, so that I can improve my abilities. It is possible. So I think that really helps for the confidence to get that shared experience, and also to have a shared experience within the program itself that, really builds that connection. And as Anne was saying, with the fun. So I know in my session, I really encourage fun. I really encourage, let's be a bit silly. Let's do a whole sequence about riding a horse. Let's, really get into it and just sort of take out the seriousness of, can this move? Does this move this way? What feels weird? And just have fun with it. And then if the group dynamic, they'll start to bounce off each other. And then they feel more comfortable sort of letting go and getting creative, because it can be scary to be asked to pretend to ride a horse on a chair in front of people that you don't really know. That group dynamic can really kind of elevate their confidence, their engagement levels, because, if they're not feeling comfortable, they're not going to engage. I would say the group dynamic is really, really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a really nice approach. What are some of the biggest leaps in rehabilitation that you've seen and that sort of thing, and moments that have really stood out to you?
Oh, well, we get some really beautiful feedback from people, but there was one participant. I do a little salsa step. We're holding onto the bar and we kind of step to the side and then come back again to the centre. And I always say this is so that you can get out of the way of the small dog or the small child that comes running out in front of you, maybe at a family event or when you're out and about. So you actually got a hope of staying upright. Rather than them knocking you over. And I did have a guy, he said to me, yep, I used to just fall, but now I don't. And if I could put that on a trophy, that's what I would do. That was really fantastic. But just, watching people's confidence grow, just watching them sort of become happier in themselves, in what they can do, even if things like maybe their range of motion hasn't improved very much because of a particular injury or because of the stroke, but they're not so worried about it anymore. They're okay with what they can do. They know what they can do, and they're okay with it. And the grief of what people have lost during the stroke, sort of, you can see it slipping away a little bit, which is really beautiful to see.
Fantastic. Yeah, it sounds like you're making a difference in people's lives on multiple levels, which is really special.
Yeah, I think that's what is really special about this program, as opposed to just doing one part of the program. Each part is really good on its own, but having all of them together They can feel themselves getting stronger in the physio. They can feel like make the connections, and then the cognitive capacity of being able to follow a movement pattern or draw a kookaburra, like just all of those things together really kind of layer on layer and just build their confidence. I think it would be good for people who have had other big life-changing experiences as well, actually.
Yeah, I think that, you could apply it. It's seems like such a multifaceted approach, and something that can really help people in, like I said, a number of dimensions. So I think that you're right about that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jen, for joining me on the show and for sharing that with us. It was very interesting to hear from you. So, yeah, thank you very much. Alrighty, and now we'll hear from Dr. Heidi Janssen. So, Heidi, what originally inspired you to develop the ESTEEM program?
There were a few things, Guy, that inspired the idea of ESTEEM. In my background as a physiotherapist, working in rehabilitation with stroke survivors for many years, and in group settings, I appreciated the benefits of group approach to recovery. I'd also done a PhD looking at translating the use of environmental enrichment into the clinical setting. And environmental enrichment describes settings or conditions where people or participants have an opportunity to engage in physical, cognitive and social activities or stimulation. And the evidence around that is that can promote brain plasticity, and in stroke recovery and rehab, it's really important to promote plasticity because that's what helps reshape or remold the brain and ask parts that haven't been damaged by the stroke to take up new jobs and try to move and talk and do the things that the dead part of the brain might have used to have done. So a little bit around my clinical experience and the science from the research I was doing. And the third part that inspired myself and the team is the inequitable access to stroke recovery options in regional areas. So in metropolitan areas, if you have a stroke, you tend to have a much bigger suite of rehab and recovery options and supports. But as soon as you move into the more regional or rural, that access diminishes for a multitude of reasons. But those three elements together and funding from a HMRI fellowship enabled us to work with stakeholders around this idea, so health professionals, stroke survivors, carers and creatives in the community, to come with a model of environmental enrichment that could be accessed in a community setting and then rolled out in regional communities to help address that gap in terms of recovery options. And another important element of the ESTEEM program is it's being delivered outside of traditional health services. So being delivered by non-government organisation care providers. So those sort of care providers that might support people who are on NDIS or My Aged Care funding. And that motivation was again around an understanding that public health services tend to focus on helping people recover from acute episodes more often, and then they return to community where that responsibility can tend to fall on other services. And so we were trying to cover a lot of different bases in the development, and I'm hoping we are getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fantastic. And how does ESTEEM differ from traditional stroke recovery models?
Great question. There are some similarities, but there are some very important differences. So as I mentioned, it's being delivered by NGOs or non-government organisations. We do have one traditional health professional involved in the delivery, a physiotherapist, and then we have care coordinators or care providers that don't have tend to have the tertiary education a formal health professional would have. And then we have creatives as well. So there's only really one health professional involved in delivering the program. And the program itself doesn't focus on goals, doesn't focus on training skill or other deficits that have been lost after stroke. the recovery model focuses on people participating in those three elements, succeeding, having fun, trying something different, because it's that combination of activities that has been found to help drive this change in the brain. And at the moment, while we can't measure that just yet, what we are seeing is that people are recovering in different ways. They are starting to use their affected limbs, for example. They are starting to try things that they, haven't done before since the stroke, or even before the stroke. So, for example, in the creative sessions, people are often drawing for the first time in 80 years or 60 years, or dance, and they don't traditionally dance. And that's an important part of the science, because enrichment conditions, by definition, should encourage participation in novel activity that's fun and that excites the brain. So trying something different is important. Succeeding, feeling supported when doing that is also really important.
Absolutely, and it's pretty incredible that that some of the participants are doing things that they haven't done in years. I think that must be a pretty amazing feeling for them to have that sort of development, to be able to do those things.
It is, and people often will come. I think Jen mentioned, I don't dance, and so we don't always call it dance, because we don't want people to say that's not what I do. We're not going to do it, because we encourage, when people sign up, they're signing up with a commitment to try all three elements, because that's what we know is, or in experimental models, that's what works the best when you have these things in combination. So we encourage people to try. Sometimes people will try and then they might default to go just to the dance or just to the art. But sometimes people try it and go, actually, I can do this, or that's not as bad as what I thought. Oh, it's actually fun. And doing it amongst other people that are at the same life experience as them, feeling quite vulnerable, feeling different, and just having fun and having a go. And as one of the, I think Jen and Anne both mentioned, no judgment. Not that other rehab models have judgment, but I think that we don't focus at ESTEEM on what people can't do. It's just celebrating the can do.
Yeah. And can you please explain the role of environmental enrichment in stroke recovery in simple terms?
Yeah, as mentioned before, that combination of physical, cognitive and social activity, when we look at the brains of animals in experimental models of stroke, we see that recovering in environments that enable that combination of activities, their brains change and they become more receptive to rewiring or remoulding, that neuroplasticity. And that's really important both in developing a healthy brain, but also recovering from a brain injury. So in animal models, not just of stroke, Parkinson's, brain injury, other degenerative conditions, when there's exposure to this sort of environment, the brain changes, and in conjunction with training, so skilled retraining, the person or the animal recovers better in terms of being able to gain more function.
It's a pretty incredible thing, neuroplasticity and the rewiring and growth, recovery of the brain.
It is. Oh, look, we don't know not even 20% of what the brain is possible of achieving. That's what we're trying to tap into. But being able to measure it is really challenging at this stage in terms of that neuroplasticity level.
Yeah.
So we're using other outcomes to understand what the benefit of coming into this program has on people's recovery.
Absolutely. And I guess we've kind of already touched on this, but what evidence or research most strongly supports the ESTEEM approach?
We do have some preliminary evidence. So at the moment, we're in what we call a phase 3 effectiveness trial, where we have a group of people that don't get it straight away and a group of people that do, and we compare their outcomes. So that's the phase we're at now. But leading up to that, we've done what's called a pilot study and a feasibility study. And the results from the pilot study indicate that people get better in terms of their mood and their function, importantly. And that preliminary data helps us stay motivated around doing this hard part of recruiting the number we need to demonstrate real benefit at a statistical level. There's other evidence in similar studies in the community setting and in stroke survivors that have had a stroke 2 years ago even. There's one particular one that was in Sweden that saw that people that participated in 6 months of horse riding or a movement to music type therapy, either of those things, their perceived recovery in stroke was much better than people that got nothing. So that doesn't really talk to what's happening at a brain level, but it demonstrates that doing these sort of activities, even at a later stage after stroke, people feel like they're getting better or they've got better. And that's really important for us as humans to, have a satisfying quality of life after such a life-changing event.
It's absolutely true. It's interesting that you mentioned the horse riding. Was there any justification or reason, or was it kind of arbitrary, that choice of activity?
I don't know why they chose that particular modality, but as a physio, I can talk mainly to what it would do at a physical level in terms of horse riding. Would activate your core a lot more. You'd be getting stronger in your arms and legs. So we can think of that at a physical level. Obviously, doing it in a group, you're getting that social stimulation. And there's also coordination involved with being able to hold things whilst kicking and trying to stabilise and just doing something that maybe you've never done before. So that's an important part of the cognitive stimulation, is exciting your brain with trying something that it's never had to try and work out how to do.
Right, that's interesting. I think we've touched on this a little bit as well, but how does the combination of physical, cognitive and social activities enhance neuroplasticity?
They don't fully understand the underlying mechanism around why it is that combination of things works. There's a few theories. One of the theories is that it literally just excites the brain. So it makes the neurons become more excited, and that then triggers this change in pathways and other structural changes that happen in the brain. Another one is around being in these situations or environments creates little stresses to the occupant or the person. And as we know, having a little bit of stress in life is actually helpful because it helps you create or develop resilience emotionally, but at a neurological level as well, they see that being in these stressful environments helps you respond to anxiety-provoking moments a little bit better. So you develop coping skills. So that's a couple of theories. Importantly, when they look in experimental models comparing, say, animals that just get access to exercise or those that just get the social stimulation, when they look at their recovery and what happens at a brain level when you just get one of the elements, when you get all three, it always outperforms the single element. So that's talking to there's something going on when you're doing all three, rather than just exercising and doing nothing else.
It's interesting that you mentioned stress and, eustress, which is that sort of that beneficial stress, I guess you could say. It sounds like, the idea is to get the brain firing, introduce these small stresses, and then help the participants to feel empowered to overcome those things by themselves. And it sounds like that is a big thing for helping people to achieve this autonomy or even a sense of autonomy or, those sorts of improvements.
Totally, because one thing we do know is to be a healthy, happy, adjusted human, we all need to feel autonomous or have control over our choice. We need to feel connected to other people, and we need to feel competent. And I think that's something else, although that's not something that's being measured in experimental models of enrichment. I think when we translate that into the human setting, that's what I'm seeing as one of the biggest things is this is an environment where people can determine how they feel and how they recover. It's empowering. We're giving them autonomy or control around what they do in the sessions. They have that connection with people with lived experience. And we celebrate when they do something new or they develop a new skill. That's the competency.
How do specifically creative activities help with emotional recovery after stroke?
I don't know if we know that answer just yet. There is a little bit of evidence around the therapeutic value of engaging in, say, art therapy in terms of, expressing feelings and processing difficult emotions through art. And I can't speak to that because that's not my field of expertise. But from my observation, I think part of it might be for ESTEEM around trying something new, succeeding, and reflecting, okay, I've had a stroke, but it doesn't mean I can't do new things. Doesn't mean that, I can't do anything of value. We encourage a mindset around, not necessarily explicitly, but I think the environment encourages the mindset, yes, you've had a stroke, that's one thing, but that doesn't change who you are and what you can do. You just happen to have a stroke and you're here and you're generating this amazing art and you're moving in a fun and skilled way to the music.
What feedback from participants has stayed with you the most?
Yeah, I get a lot of feedback. I'm very privileged to talk to most participants that go through the program. And one thing I do want to try and explore one day is the value that this sense of community has brought to the program. So there's the science, which I've outlined around enrichment. That was the initial motivation for this, is let's translate this into the community setting and see what value there is for people recovering from stroke. But another one coming through is that sense of community that people develop. Peer support is one thing. So when they're together, everyone's sharing stories and either reflecting on how they are compared to others or seeing how people can progress many years after stroke if they've just come after a stroke. But community, because now people are connecting outside of our group, and that's happened organically. So part of our program isn't to give out phone numbers and for people to catch up once a month for lunch or, ring each other. But that's actually what's evolved organically, is that people are now meeting up once a month for lunch. And that's quite a big group, up to 25 people sometimes. And that's driven by the participants themselves. So they've obviously connected well with people at the program and they want to remain connected as a community. We have a Facebook page as well where people they interact a lot with the content that we put up when we share progress, when we have celebrations at our sites and when we share education. So that's one thing I would say, is that people tell me in many different ways what impact the community has had on their recovery and not feeling so isolated.
That's so lovely. It sounds like it must be a very fulfilling thing to do for you. It sounds like you're really making a difference in people's lives. So I think that's really important and special.
Yeah, I do feel that. I do see it. I do hear it. I do feel it. The challenge is being able to capture that in the measurements that we have done in order to understand the benefit at an evidence level to help get funding for this program beyond this research trial. And that's a challenge many researchers have. That's why we ask these questions. We measure these programs and interventions, because without that evidence, it's very difficult to argue for something to be funded or to be valid enough for people to use precious healthcare money to pay for it.
Absolutely. That segues us quite nicely into another question I had for you, actually, which is about barriers to scaling the ESTEEM program across Australia. Do you think that is the most significant one in that regard?
Yes, I think it is. We're measuring many things, not just at a participant level, but at a program level and a systems level. The biggest challenge I see will be who's going to fund it. At the moment, we're trying to set it up so that it will be eligible for people to use their government funding from NDIS or My Aged Care, or even private health. And then your next step is out of pocket. So there's some some people have a lot of different options to fund their ongoing stroke recovery. Some people have none. And it's knowing how to develop the program and integrate it into systems that's going to maximise access. We are measuring how we're implementing it, and our implementation process is meeting with the team to understand their local needs, to be able to adapt the program to implement it successfully. We go back, we evaluate how well we did that. So we're learning all the time we roll it out how to do it well, and that will help with scale up. The biggest thing will be who's going to pay for it. Is it going to be paid at a participant level or government funding level, or is it something that people need to pay for? And then that limits access, right? We end up just providing it to those people that can afford to pay for it. And in my observation as a clinician, most often the biggest value is to those that aren't in as a privileged position to be able to afford to attend all these stroke recovery options.
What are the biggest common challenges that stroke survivors face that ESTEEM helps address?
In the regional areas, it's simply just access to ongoing activities that's going to help them recover emotionally, physically, like the exercise and the physio, and that connection with peers. So the social isolation, it helps avoid that. I would say that's the biggest one in terms of for regional stroke survivors, and just more broadly, that social isolation that sometimes happens to any stroke survivor, regardless if they live in a big city that's busy and they get lots of therapy. People can sometimes stay isolated by staying at home and not going out because they're worried about how their changes make them look. Unfortunately, sometimes people lose a lot of their pre-stroke friends because they don't want to interact with them, or pre-stroke friends can sometimes stop talking to them because of perhaps fear around how do I talk to this person now since their stroke. So I think that social isolation is something that the program can address regardless of where a person lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, you mentioned in rural communities, I dare say that this sort of thing probably wouldn't be particularly common in those sorts of places. And, it not only do you give them that social component, but the physical, cognitive, everything. So I think that's really nice that, that you're giving people an opportunity to do those things in those sorts of areas.
Yeah, and in those settings, as you reflect, Guy, the challenge will be having the number needed to run a viable program in terms of a funding sort of perspective. So we are also in the midst of developing a protocol to try and develop an online version of ESTEEM, because sometimes online or a telehealth version can be more cost-effective, because you can have one team sitting one place and you can reach a lot of people via telehealth. So that's our next step, whilst we're still evaluating the in-person benefits, is to understand how to do it online so that we are not limited by travel and the ability for people to get there in terms of transport.
And Heidi, what has this research changed about how you view stroke recovery?
I think I've said it a lot in this interview already, is the role that community plays, and also the importance of focusing on what people can do and celebrate doing new things. As a physio, I've worked in stroke recovery for a long time, and you tend to have that lens of, okay, this is the thing that's been lost. How do we return to that? And there are important things to do, because often it's about walking, standing, walking, and doing activities that are important for people to return as close as they can to their pre-stroke life. But with that sometimes comes a lot of failure, because people are trying to get there and they just can't get there. And I think what I've learnt looking at ESTEEM and the benefits people are receiving is the value in sometimes not even focusing on those sort of more functional goals, focusing on what helps people feel good about themselves again and connected to others, and just playing. playing is powerful, and we stop doing that as we become adults, right?
Yes.
Kids do it so well, and they fail when they play. They try and they fail, and then they try again, and all of that is a learning process. And our systems might not enable us to have time to do it like that, but this sort of program, there's a space for them to do that.
If you could redesign stroke recovery globally, what would it look like based on what you've learned from ESTEEM?
I don't know. But people need a lot more time than the traditional, 5 days in acute stroke units. Then it's traditionally, at best 1 month in rehab, maybe a longer time. And then if you get access to recovery options in the community, you might get another 3 months or so. On average, people might have a 6-month journey of rehab that's funded either by, private health or free from public health. People need more time than that to recover from such a life-changing event, whether it be, impairments that are quite marked and obvious to everyone, and sometimes they're not. It could be changing mood, energy levels or fatigue, and that can have a huge impact on people's life and being able to do the things they enjoy. And so our current systems, and it comes back to capacity, we can't fund everything. But I think rehab more broadly, if we had lots of money and, we had this global focus on recovery is lifelong, how do we develop a model where people can dip in and out as needed, and we support people around that long-term journey rather than just you're going to get this rehab now and then you're going to go home and then you're going to work it out for yourself. And it's not just for stroke, that's for a lot of different conditions and health changes that people have. As you reflected with Jen, this model of recovery has got potential benefits for many different conditions that people experience living in the community. And once we know the benefits of ESTEEM, the goal is for it to be a program that people can come back to when needed along their stroke recovery journey. We just have to work out how we can make that financially viable.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on the show today, Heidi.
Thanks, Guy.
And if people want to find more information about the program, where can they do that?
Guy, we've got a few different options. We've got a Facebook page, or uppercase ESTEEM, ESTEEM, and we've got a great website where you can find out information about our 2 active sites at Maitland region and the Newcastle region, and we're hoping to get one up in Taree soon, and that's at www.esteemafterstroke.com.au.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for joining us on the show, Heidi, and all the best.
Thanks, Guy.
My guests today were Dr. Heidi Janssen, Jen Murrell, and Anne Angel. Thank you for joining us on the show. Thank you for listening. I'm Guy Murphy, and all of us at Wellbeing wish you well.